Hello, my name is Howard Rosenblum. This is my name sign. Who am I? I am the new Chief Executive Officer, CEO, of the National Organization for the Deaf, NAD. I want to thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to explain and present to you, and kind of like a town hall meeting. First, I want to thank you for hosting the town hall, and so we could talk about our residential schools. It's a really important topic that's impacting a lot of people all over the United States. So I want to thank you again for hosting this and taking the time and the energy to come here and discuss and brainstorm all the new ideas, how to save our precious children's future. Truly, children are our future. They're the leaders. In the future, we'll have them. And we need to defend them now because in the future, we'll have to have them for our community and to have the success of NAD. Today, we're going to look at a lot of various issues, how we can cherish and protect and promote our culture for our deaf children. We can see in many areas now, it's a lot of impact all over the United States of residential schools. A lot of residential schools are closing. In New York, a lot of school systems are closing, and there's going to be a really drastic change in the system, and we want to prevent that. And other states are struggling, like in South Dakota, Kansas, and they are having trouble keeping the schools open, and they're forced to close. Also in California, in Missouri, in Kentucky, Florida, all over the United States. So we can't allow that to happen. We can't and we shouldn't allow it to happen for them to go ahead and proceed to close the schools without us being involved in it. We're part of the community. We need to step up to the table. We need to be involved. We need to discuss with them and tell them and advocate and explain to everyone how important education is in all the states. And that's definitely what our community needs. They can't make decisions about our children's education without our input. So what can we do now to help? I want to have 3 different topics I want to discuss. First is the financial implications, the legal implications, and political. Before I go ahead and discuss this, you can look at our NAD mission statement for residential schools and what's important to us, and we can use that to inform everyone of our advocacy. Where can you find our mission statement? I'll explain it to you. NAD, our statement can be found at this website, located here on the bottom of the screen. Now I want to discuss the 3 issues: financial, legal, and political. In a lot of states, they're closing schools and cutting the funding for residential schools. Most states are obsessed about costs and money, and then they get politics involved because if they're cutting programs, they're trying to decide which programs can they cut. And since they want to cut different programs, and some of them make a lot of noise, and then they decide they can't. So they decide they can cut the deaf programs because the deaf community doesn't have a large voice to combat that. So we cannot be quiet about that. We need to come together. Each state needs to come up and speak up for the advocacy of our deaf community. So now we need to let the politics know that they can't touch our residential schools. So now I want to talk about the financial implications. So they're cutting the schools, and they think that they're going to be saving money by closing the residential schools, and they're really not. We want to explain to them if they cut the residential schools and the programs, and it'll really increase the cost for the state. How is that possible that they're increasing the cost of the state? For the deaf schools to be closed, what happens after that? The deaf children are sent through into public schools, one, and not a lot of in each school, but one in each school. And then the poor deaf children will be one into each hearing program, and it's really uncomfortable for them. So when that one deaf child is into the hearing program, into a mainstream program, how do they learn the language? How can they get the language and the culture? Through ASL is how they'll experience that. So how is that possible for you to put one student into a classroom with an interpreter? They can't learn the language with just through an interpreter. That's impossible. So now that the residential schools are gone, the states are setting up programs where the deaf children are isolated in the mainstream. And they have to get interpreters to go to each child and the teachers to go to each child. While that's really a high cost, really if they would have all the deaf children in the same area, in the same school, it would be more cost effective to teach them. So we need to tell the government that it is not cost effective to close the schools. If you want to save the money, then you need to save the residential schools. That's the discussion number one. The second point is the political issues. Like I discussed before, financial, they want to cut the schools, and really we need to tell them we need to stand up for our rights about closing the schools. We cannot wait until the school happens, and we can't wait until they close the schools. They need and cut the programs. We cannot wait a whole year. We need to do it now. We need to stand up and have the legislation for all the deaf children to have the schools. We cannot wait until they talk about cutting the funding. We need to know and meet now in the legislations. We need to vote for it now. So we need to understand that when we meet a representative for our district, we need to tell them our issues. And we need to tell them that you're required in Congress to stand up for us and to stand up for our issues and discuss our issues. We want the deaf residential schools open. We want the deaf children to go to school where they'll learn how to sign and learn ASL. And we also want everyone to know that cutting the funding isn't really helping. It'll save money if you keep the schools open. We need to meet to our congressmen, our legislation, and tell them over time. So when it's time to cut the funding, they'll know we have someone to advocate for us. And we have strong voices to stand up for our rights. And we can't wait until it happens. We need to have our power and meet with our politicians now and have the legislation changed and tell them we refuse for the schools to be closed. So now the legal issues. So we want to stand up for our children's rights. It's illegal for the children not to have rights. So the parents need to complain. It's important for us to come and try and stand up for it, but it's not going to do it all the way. The parents need to stand up and tell them that we don't want the schools to be closed. The parents must educate everyone in the community. The parents, either if they're deaf or hearing, they need to tell everyone, what can we do to make sure that the state knows what to do, how to set up the right money for the residential schools. Without the parents, there's no power. And we need to teach the parents to know what the main issue is. All the deaf children have a right to a proper education, and they have the rights to learn their language and their community as well. And they should have many options. And they have a lot of options, a constitution of options. And what does that mean? There's a range, and they can pick what's right for their families. Many parents like to have their children into mainstream school, and that's fine. But also, there's another wide range of options to choose from. At the other end is that they can be involved in a residential school. So that's fine. If they want to be mainstream, that's fine. It's their right to choose. But parents need to know they can also change to choose residential schools. They have a freedom of choice, but now the freedom of choice is gone. So we need to educate our legislative department and know the range of options that need to be chosen from. If the schools are closed, then that option is gone. That's why I discussed the 3 different issues. Financial, we want everyone to know you're not saving the money if you close the schools. The state isn't saving money. Really, you'll save the money if the schools are open. And the political aspect, and make sure the legislations understand and they hear us. And we need to repeat ourselves again and again and make sure and pressure them so they'll understand our issues. And we need to let the deaf community know, and we can't be too we can't be too aggressive in telling them. We need to be respectful, and we need to be sure that we want what's best for our community, and we need to tell them, inform them again. The NAD will work with the community to develop and to provide these lists and see what's important for the politics. We will develop that with you. And the political, financial, legislative. We want to inform all our politicians what's important, and we need to get the parents involved, and we're losing that freedom of choice if the schools are gone. It's impossible to have that choice. I'm really confident that we can stop the closing of the schools and protect them being open. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a simple task just to tell them and it's going to be fixed. We need to be assertive, and every year they think about cutting the schools every year. That means we need to continue with our advocacy, and we can't let them give up and wait again and see that it's going to happen again. 365 days a year, we need to remind them. And then the deaf schools, if the deaf schools are open and the children are going to residential schools, then our deaf community can survive forever. And I really want to thank you for this opportunity to provide you with this information. And I want to let you know the NAD will be there to help advocate for the importance of our residential schools being open.